In this video, I'm going to take a look back at Star Trek Into Darkness, the 12th movie in the Star Trek film series, and the second one set in the Kelvin timeline. And with that out of the way, let's get started. Released in 2013, Star Trek Into Darkness was once again directed by J.J. Abrams. The story begins as Captain Kirk and the crew of the Starship Enterprise attempt to save the population of the planet Niburu from a natural disaster. When Kirk breaks the Prime Directive by exposing the ship to the inhabitants, he's demoted to First Officer, while Admiral Pike is reinstated as Commander of the Enterprise. Meanwhile, a superhuman terrorist known only as John Harrison begins a one-man war in the Federation by bombing a Section 31 building in London, and later attacking Starfleet headquarters, in which Admiral Pike is killed. With Starfleet launching an official manhunt to capture Harrison, Kirk is reinstated as captain, and he and the crew of the Enterprise are ordered to set out to find and kill Harrison, who has fled to the Klingon homeworld of Kronos. With J.J. Abrams' Star Trek reboot in 2009 proving to be a big success, Paramount Pictures were quick to sign up the same creative team for the next film in the series. Screenwriters Roberto Orci, Alex Kurtzman, along with Damon Lindelof, who worked on Abrams' TV series Lost, got to work on a screenplay, but Abrams wasn't sure he would direct, choosing to wait until the script was completed before committing to the film. Originally scheduled for a June 2012 release, several factors would end up delaying the film until 2013. J.J. Abrams would first direct his passion project Super 8. Further delaying the film was the screenwriters having difficulty coming up with the proper story. Selecting who the movie's villain was going to be also took some time. With the 2009 film creating a new timeline, the writers had the opportunity to pick an antagonist who had appeared in previous films and TV series. Although famous antagonists like the Klingons were considered, the writers felt that the character of Khan Noonien Singh had to be used at some point, as he was such an important character in the original timeline. In an interview with Empire magazine, Alex Kurtzman referred to Khan as being the Joker of Star Trek, and compared the coming sequel to The Dark Knight. With the script completed, Abrams officially signed on to direct the film. Several actors such as Damien Bichir and Benicio del Toro were considered to play the villain, but Benedict Cumberbatch was officially cast as the terrorist John Harrison. Like Star Trek VI: The Undiscovered Country, Into Darkness is a very elaborate plot with lots of twists and turns, where it's not entirely clear who the main villains of the story are. At the time the film was released, the fear of terrorism was still very prominent in the public eye, and this is a major theme of Into Darkness. The attacks on London and Starfleet headquarters early in the film prompts Kirk to seek revenge. Spock and McCoy question Kirk's motives, as he accepts Admiral Marcus's orders to essentially go on an assassination mission to kill John Harrison with new stealth torpedoes. In a way, both Kirk and Harrison have the same motivations. Everything they do is in response to an attack on those that they consider their family. The difference is that Kirk's friends and colleagues eventually manage to convince him not to cross the line and become a murderer like Harrison. Kurtzman and Orci have spoken about how the main theme of Into Darkness is, how far will we go to exact vengeance and justice on an enemy that scares us? How far should we go from our values? The enemy's blood is within us. We are the enemy. We must not succumb to it. We are the same. As much as the Kelvin timeline movies are dismissed by some fans as mindless action films, they continue to do what Star Trek has done from the very beginning: make commentary on the human condition through the lens of action-adventure storytelling. The movie opens with Kirk and the crew attempting to save the planet Nibiru from a cataclysmic volcanic eruption. Spock is stranded inside a volcano about to erupt, and Kirk breaks the Prime Directive by beaming him up and letting the primitive population see the Enterprise rise from an ocean. While the consequences of Kirk's actions have an impact on the overall story, this whole sequence stands alone as a fun mini-adventure in its own right. It's very much in the style of the James Bond and Indiana Jones films that would often feature a cold open, with the main characters at the climax of a movie that we haven't seen completely. One of the most common criticisms of the first film by long-term Star Trek fans was Kirk being promoted so quickly to Enterprise Captain after only attending Starfleet Academy for 4 years. The writers seem to acknowledge this in the plot of this film, as Pike demotes Kirk for breaking the Prime Directive on Nibiru. While this is a gut punch to Kirk, Pike does later soften the blow by informing that he's convinced Admiral Marcus, more on him later, to have Kirk be Pike's first officer in the Enterprise.
What did you tell him?
The truth. That I believe in you. That if anybody deserves a second chance, it's Jim Kirk.
This bar scene was actually a reshoot done after the bulk of shooting was done. Pike is very much a father figure to Kirk in these movies, and it's Pike's death later on that really powers the story along as Kirk seeks vengeance on Harrison. The filmmakers realised that the earlier scene where Kirk is demoted was too confrontational, and this bar scene really conveys the father-son dynamic between these two characters. The film's main plot begins as we see a Starfleet officer whose daughter is dying of an apparently incurable disease, coerced into bombing what looks like a public archive in London by John Harrison. Harrison's blood has healing properties, and in a simultaneously moving but horrific sequence, we see this officer sacrifice himself for the life of his daughter. When the senior commanders of Starfleet gather for a meeting to discuss the bombing, Harrison attacks a one-man fighter, killing Admiral Pike in the process. Although he's too late to prevent the attack, what I like about this scene is that, like in the last movie, it shows Kirk's tactical awareness and his sense of thinking ahead. It was his warning of the Romulan trap waiting for them on Vulcan that saved them in the last movie, and here, he seems to figure out that the archive bombing was partly a distraction to give Harrison the chance to attack all the senior officers of Starfleet in one location. Pike's death is extremely sad and moving, brilliantly acted by Bruce Greenwood. Chris Pine is also excellent in this scene. As I said earlier, Pike is very much the closest thing he had to a father, and this is what sets him off on a revenge mission to find Harrison. After discovering that Harrison used a portable long-range transporter to escape to the Klingon homeworld of Kronos, Admiral Marcus reveals that the archive in London was a top-secret branch of Starfleet codenamed Section 31. The origins of Section 31 in the Star Trek universe dates back to Deep Space Nine Season 6 episode Inquisition. In that story, Dr. Julian Bashir is accused of being a spy for the Dominion.
What does Section 31 do?
We search out and identify potential dangers to the Federation.
And once identified,
We deal with them.
how?
Quietly.
While Earth of the 23rd and 24th century in Star Trek has often been conveyed as a peaceful, utopian society free of war, crime and conflict, writer Ira Stephen Bear wanted to explore exactly why Earth was a paradise in the future. In the 1999 companion book to the series, Bear said, "Why is Earth a paradise in the 24th century? Well, maybe because there's someone watching over it and doing the nasty stuff no one wants to think about." In the 4th season of the prequel series Star Trek Enterprise, Section 31 made a retroactive first appearance in the two-part episodes Affliction and Divergence. Their appearance here in Star Trek Into Darkness makes a lot of sense given how close Earth came to being wiped out by the Narada in the previous movie. Section 31 would be motivated to find new weapons and technology to prevent the Federation after such an attack. More on that later. Carol Marcus is played by Alice Eve. Originally introduced as Carol Wallace, it turns out she placed herself on the Enterprise undercover to investigate why her father, Admiral Marcus, armed the ship with experimental torpedoes. Carol, of course, is the same character who appeared in The Wrath of Khan, played by B.B. Besh, and was the mother of Kirk's son David. Kirk and Carol were estranged, but she's a pivotal character in Kirk's life for obvious reasons. Here in Into Darkness, there's very little to suggest that Kirk and Carol are going to end up together, besides, of course, the infamous scene where Carol strips down to her underwear while Kirk sneaks a peek.
Turn around.
Even in the pre-Me Too era, when this film was released, this scene generated some mild controversy due to its inclusion in the film, as just an excuse to show off Miss Eve's not completely unattractive, almost naked body. While screenwriter Damon Lindelof has since apologised on Twitter for the scene, Alice Eve, to her credit, has rejected this backlash, and said she didn't feel exploited. It was something I voluntarily worked with a trainer to be fit for, was very much prepared for, and very much enjoyed doing, filming, executing, promoting. The feeling I shouldn't have done it or that it was exploitation was confusing to me. For the record, I have no problem with this scene. None whatsoever. With the Enterprise armed with new stealth torpedoes, the ship warps to Klingon space to carry out its mission to kill Harrison. Spock and McCoy, however, convince Kirk that they should capture Harrison instead, so he can stand trial. Not giving to terrorism and not sinking to their methods are primary themes of the film. But it's interesting how Spock convinces Kirk not to seek revenge and take Harrison alive, considering what happens at the film's climax, but we'll get to that later. So Kirk takes Spock, Uhura and a few officers to Kronos in a small Kerbrokian ship that Kirk says was confiscated during the Mud incident. This is a fun little reference to the original series episode, Mud's Women. It's also here where I feel at this point that the big three of this particular trilogy was Kirk, Spock and Uhura, rather than Kirk, Spock and McCoy from the original series. If you look at the posters and advertising of these three movies, you can clearly see that it was these three characters that were the main focus of this trilogy. To a certain extent I can understand why they did this. Not only were they looking to broaden the franchise's appeal by focusing on the younger characters, but by focusing on Uhura, they were appealing to a potentially bigger female audience than before. Certainly, Zoe Saldana's star had risen in the past few years, thanks to her appearance in Avatar. I don't think McCoy is sidelined in any way though, and I just think that Uhura has a more substantial role here than she did in the original series. The team arrives at Kronos and are almost immediately attacked by a random patrol of Klingon warbirds. The following chase sequence is yet another instance of J.J. Abrams being heavily inspired by Star Wars. It's all very fast paced, and you can't help but notice Kirk's ship here is very much like the Millennium Falcon. And this would come full circle in Abrams' next film, Star Wars Force Awakens, which would have a very similar chase scene, with the ships in both sequences manoeuvring through tight spaces and wreckage. This whole Klingon sequence has some of my personal favourite moments from Michael Giacchino's terrific soundtrack. It's very much inspired by Klingon music from past Treks, but Giacchino gives it his own unique flavour. Cornered by the Klingons, Uhura volunteers to try to reason with them face to face, and it's here where the Klingons remove their helmets and reveal their appearance. The Klingons were actually at one point part of the previous film, but were deleted from the final cut of the movie. Some fans have complained about the Klingons' appearance here being very different from the versions we've seen in past Treks, but I've never had a problem with it. I mean, why should all Klingons look the same? We have different races and ethnicities in the real world, and I've always seen these Klingons as being simply from a different tribe or something. The Klingon appearance has changed, of course, over the past 50 years or so. Budget limitations of the time meant their appearance was basically just a slapped-on paint job, but has been upgraded during the various spin-offs and movies. This change from their original appearances had a few attempts at in-universe explanations, such as DS9's Trials and Tribulations episode, and a more direct attempt at a retroactive explanation in Enterprise's two-part episodes Affliction and Divergence, which was a result of them experimenting and creating their own genetic Superman. The cure came to be known as the Archer virus, which was a result of Captain Archer providing human DNA and making Klingons take on a more human appearance. With the Klingons about to execute Uhura, John Harrison attacks in one of the best action sequences of the film, as he almost single-handedly wipes out the entire platoon of Klingons. It's here where the strength and power of this character is truly revealed, and it's also here where most people familiar with the history of Star Trek pretty much had their suspicions of who Harrison was actually confirmed. Harrison surrenders to Kirk when he realises that the torpedoes targeted him by the Enterprise are of his own design. And one of my favourite scenes of the film, Kirk takes out his anger on Harrison by attempting to beat the crap out of him, but doesn't seem to be able to hurt him, while Harrison just looks on in fascination as if he is dealing with a child. Harrison is arrested and taken aboard the Enterprise, which at this point has had its engines sabotaged, and they're stuck in the border of Klingon space. It's at this point in the film that all the conspiracies of the film and other characters' hidden agendas are revealed. Carol is revealed to be Admiral Marcus's daughter, the torpedoes have frozen people in them, and Harrison's true identity is revealed.
I looked up John Harrison. Until a year ago, he didn't exist.
John Harrison was a fiction created the moment I was awoken by your Admiral Marcus to help him advance his cause.
My name is Khan.
And here we have to talk about the biggest controversy of the film. The filmmakers, for better or worse, did their best to have the true identity of the film's main villain be a secret. This extended to the film's promotional tour. Basically, the entire cast had to lie in every interview and say that Benedict Cumberbatch's character was named John Harrison, which was technically true, but in the context of the film was a false identity. Khan, of course, was the villain played so unforgettably by Ricardo Montalban in Star Trek II. There was further controversy with Benedict Cumberbatch's casting, as the character as many saw it was whitewashing, given Montalban was a Mexican. However, in the context of the film's story, it makes sense that Khan's appearance would be different. Even today in our real world, we have facial recognition technology. With such a notorious dictator like Khan moving around in the future of Star Trek, it would make sense that his appearance would have to be altered to be an agent of Section 31. Khan is a remnant of the eugenics wars. In the original series timeline, the war took place in the late 1990s, and Khan and his followers left Earth in a ship called the Botany Bay, went into deep freeze, and was awoken in the original series episode Space Seed by Captain Kirk and his crew. After a failed attempt to take over the Enterprise, Khan and his people were exiled to planet Ceti Alpha 5, but returned 15 years later in the events of Star Trek II. Into Darkness tells us that in this timeline, the destruction of Vulcan prompted Section 31 to seek out new weapons to defend against whatever threats were coming next, and they're the ones who wake up Khan and his followers. I think this is actually a brilliant idea by the film's writers, that already in this timeline, events are altered so that Kirk and the Enterprise crew come face to face with Khan sooner than expected. Cumberbatch, despite having the unenviable task of acting in a role already portrayed with perfection by Ricardo Montalban, gives a fantastic performance in this film and makes the role his own. Everything from his scary appearance and pitch-perfect line delivery suggests that this is a man not to be messed with and capable of unspeakable acts. I actually respect the writers trying to keep this plot reveal secret. In an era where plot spoilers are often leaked online months in advance of the film's release or even spoiled in trailers, I appreciate the filmmakers trying to keep an air of mystery over a major film's plot. My own personal theory before the film's release was that the film's villain would actually turn out to be Gary Mitchell, Kirk's friend turned super being in the second Star Trek pilot Where No Man Has Gone Before. So after Carol and McCoy open up the new torpedoes, they find that they have Khan's people frozen inside them. Khan attacks Starfleet because he thought Admiral Marcus had them killed. All of a sudden, Marcus arrives in the USS Vengeance, a Dreadnought-class Federation warship designed by Khan. The concept of a Federation warship in Star Trek is an uncommon one, but not unique to this film. The most famous example is, of course, the USS Defiant from Deep Space Nine, which was the first example in the franchise of a ship built primarily for battle. Starfleet is described in the previous film by Pike as a peacekeeping humanitarian armada. Federation ships like the Enterprise have weapons, but are officially for use in defense. The Vengeance is a scary looking ship that looks like it's built to destroy. I've always found it funny though that for such a top secret project, Admiral Marcus keeps a small model of it on his desk. Maybe this was deliberate foreshadowing by the film's writers, or maybe Marcus doesn't care about displaying it openly, as he may have had the full backing of Starfleet Command to build this ship. The movie never makes it clear how far up the chain of command people knew about this operation. Admiral Marcus was played by Peter Weller. Weller was a long-time veteran of science fiction and fantasy projects on film and TV, but of course is probably best known for playing Robocop in the original Paul Verhoeven film from 1987. Over the last decade or so, he's known for playing morally grey or outright villainous characters in shows like 24 and Sons of Anarchy. Marcus, it can be argued, is the real villain of Into Darkness. It's his intent to militarise Starfleet, wake up Khan to design weapons of mass destruction, and attempt to destroy the Enterprise covered up.
I took a tactical risk and I woke that bastard up, believing that his superior intelligence could help us protect ourselves from whatever came at us next. But I made a mistake, and now the blood of everybody he's killed is on my hands. Give him to me, so that I can end what I started.
In this case, Weller is perfect casting for this part, even though I pretty much knew he was a bad guy as soon as he was introduced. For one thing, he's playing a Starfleet Admiral. They tend not to have the greatest record of being sane, as I explained in my Star Trek Insurrection review. And he's played by Weller, who actually played a similarly morally bankrupt character in the two-part Star Trek Enterprise episodes, Demons and Terror Prime. When the Vengeance attacks Enterprise, all seems lost until Scotty turns out to be on the ship and disables it. With both ships in a race to restore power, Kirk convinces Khan to help him save the Enterprise and defeat Marcus in exchange for protecting his followers. The two space jump over to the Vengeance in another fantastic action sequence, which isn't entirely dissimilar to the space jump scene in the previous film, but it works, and there's great tension as Scotty tries to get the airlock door open before Kirk and Khan smash into it. Khan even saves Kirk's life during this sequence. This whole section where Kirk and Khan are working together is one of my favourite aspects of the film, and I actually wish it had lasted longer. I've always liked stories where enemies have to team up to defeat a common enemy. In fact, it can be argued that Khan has a strong sense of honour, and despite how dangerous he obviously is, he's the one who's being attacked and he's trying to protect his people. He genuinely loves his family and is striking back at those who threaten them. You may not agree with his methods, but you can understand where he's coming from. In fact, after Kirk orders Scotty to stun Khan once they take the bridge of the Vengeance, it's left ambiguous as to whether Khan would have kept his word, but Kirk wasn't, rightly so I guess, willing to take that chance. After Khan kills Admiral Marcus, he threatens to kill Kirk and Scotty unless his torpedoes carrying his followers are beamed over to the Vengeance. Spock, having consulted with Prime Spock played by Leonard Nimoy in his final appearance as the character, has already prepared for Khan betraying them and beams them over to the Vengeance rigged to explode. The Enterprise, damaged by the Vengeance, begins to fall into the Earth's atmosphere. And it's here where the film loses its way a little, as it goes straight into Wrath of Khan territory. With the Enterprise about to burn up in the atmosphere and unable to activate their warp core, Kirk sacrifices himself to save the ship by entering the reactor room and fixing it just in time. This, of course, is almost identical to the climax of Wrath of Khan, where Spock saved the ship, except in this universe, Kirk and Spock's roles are reversed. Even the dialogue is almost identical.
Jim, I think you better get down here.
Sir, you'd better get down here.
Spock races down to engineering just in time so that the two friends can say goodbye. I know many fans call this a rip-off, and of course it can't compare to the goodbye scene with Shatner and Nimoy in Star Trek II. But that doesn't take away from the fact that Chris Pine and Zachary Quinto do a fantastic job with their acting here. If you haven't seen Wrath of Khan, the scene is very moving, and if you have, it shows that in both universes, Kirk and Spock are there for each other no matter what. The earlier scene with the Spock Prime cameo, where he alludes to the events of Wrath of Khan, was the writer's way of the film acknowledging the events of Wrath of Khan happened. I understand the criticism, but I still think the scene works despite the obvious lift from the earlier film. But then of course the writers just can't help themselves, and then this happens. I'm sorry you had to see that. Yeah, this was a case where the writers really should have practiced some restraint. They were already pushing with the role reversal death scene, but trying to replicate the Shatner Khan yell with Spock was just a step too far. I have to admit that I found it worse on my first viewing of the film, but on my recent rewatch to prep for this video, I didn't mind it as much since I knew it was coming. But still, with Khan betrayed and believing his followers are dead, he sets the vengeance on a collision course with Starfleet headquarters in San Francisco, and the result is just total devastation. As a viewer, it's a spectacular sight to see such a massive ship crash into the city. But there's no question that in the context of the story, thousands of people must have been killed in this. Khan survives the crash, but Spock, now full of rage, chases after him through the city and fights him on top of some sort of hovering platform. As exciting as this sequence is, it looks like something that you expect to see from a Marvel superhero movie. Meanwhile, McCoy discovers that Khan's blood can bring people back to life, and tries to contact Spock to tell him that he needs Khan alive. The fight ends with Uhura beaming down onto the platform and stunning Khan and managing to stop Spock from finishing him off. It's interesting, however, that it takes several shots before Khan goes down, considering that about half an hour earlier, it only took one shot. Maybe her batteries were low or something. Kirk wakes up sometime later and he's back to normal. The three friends all share a laugh, and all is well. And why shouldn't it be? Only several thousand people died in that crash, right? Okay, I realise you have to suspend your disbelief when watching Star Trek or any kind of science fiction, but the idea that Khan's superblood can bring people back from the dead is just too much. It's one thing to cure people of an illness, it's another to bring the dead back. McCoy has basically found the cure for death. Shouldn't this mean that no one will have to worry about dying ever again? All they have to do is get some blood from Khan, or I presume any of his other frozen followers, and everything will be okay. This isn't the first time a certain life-giving technology is introduced and forgotten in Star Trek, of course. In the Star Trek The Next Generation episode, Unnatural Selection, Dr. Pulaski discovers a way to reverse aging, and in Relics, Scotty finds a way to preserve life for decades by using the transporter. And I don't know what it is with writers Roberto Orci and Alex Kurtzman. In addition to Into Darkness, they also wrote the following year's The Amazing Spider-Man 2, which again used the concept of superblood. Except in that case, it was Spider-Man's blood that had the ability to heal people. Anyway, 1 year later the Enterprise is relaunched, and the crew sets out into space to begin their 5-year mission as the film draws to a close. Overall, Star Trek Into Darkness is a movie that comes very close to being a truly great movie, but falls short because of some poor creative choices in its final half hour. The film is packed with some of the best action in the entire series. The special effects are incredible. Michael Giacchino's score is my personal favourite of this trilogy. The cast all give great performances. Benedict Cumberbatch in particular manages his own unique take on Khan, despite being the shadow of the great Ricardo Montalban. But for me, the standout is actually Chris Pine. He really does manage to stand out from the shadow of William Shatner as Kirk in this film, and prove what a great leading man he really is. This is coming from someone who grew up on the original series, but I like both actors equally as Kirk. I couldn't choose one over the other. On its release, Into Darkness was met with a lot of praise from critics, and did even better box office than its predecessor. The movie made over $467 million on a $185 million budget. However, over the years, the film's reputation has suffered a bit, with some even calling it the worst film in the series. I disagree with that personally. I think despite its flaws, it's a terrific film, and I always enjoy it whenever I come back to it. It would take 3 years for the crew would return in 2016 for their third big screen adventure, Star Trek Beyond. And that's the movie I'll be taking a look at next time in my final retrospective video in this series. Thanks so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, then please click the like button, consider subscribing if you haven't done so already, share with your friends, click the bell for notifications, and let me know in the comments, what did you think of Into Darkness? I hope you all look after yourselves, and I'll see you all in my next video. Bye for now.